Hey guys, welcome to WetheHoneys. I'm Honey and Kalia's not here. Probably wondering where Kalia is. She is currently preparing for some more debates that are coming up. She has been super busy lately with her previous debates and with preparing for these new ones. Her most recent one was one Christian versus two New Agers, 20 New Agers, and it took a ton of time just to build up research and doing a bunch of stuff that goes into the back end of that. So with that, we've kind of took like a brief month off, and I wanted to come on here, update you guys, make sure you guys know that hey, we're still active here. We are still doing stuff. We still plan on doing podcasts. A lot more to come. There's some talks of like some Patreon stuff that's going on in the background, just to add some extra content for you guys, and some information resources and whatnot. But that's to come a little bit in the future. I wanted to hop on here and talk about. I wanted to hop on here and talk about a topic that I feel like is really dear to my heart, and to our household's heart, to be honest. We talk about it quite often. That is church history, and the importance of church history, not just in a traditionalist kind of perspective, but more in a all around perspective. I know that there's a pretty big split within the Christian body of like believing that you're either a modernist or like traditionalist, and traditionalists are people who stick to tradition and stick to church history like to the T, and don't really want to like fold to it. And modernists are kind of the opposite of it. It's like kind of free flowing in a way and don't want to touch church history. They want to learn on their own. And I think that they're kind of equally dangerous. But I really want to hop into that topic with you guys. So, to start it out with, I want to talk about how church history kind of guards truth, how it shapes our interpretation. It also strengthens our faith, and it creates, like I kind of already said, it creates a do and don't kind of, not a gray area, but an area that we can learn from. So let's start it out, and talk about how church kind of guards truth, and that may sound weird that like history can guard truth, but it seriously can. Like, I mean, specifically the councils, early councils, they guard a lot of core doctrine within our Christian walk and Christian belief system. The most famous one is probably the Nicene Council. It's talked about endlessly on the internet. I feel like you hear it from Wes Huff. He talks about it quite often, clearing up like some lies that people kind of spread around with it. But what it really is, to kind of sum up for people who don't know what the Council of Nicaea is, the main point of the meeting was to figure out if Trinitarianism is true or if Arianism is true, which is if God is triune, uh, in its essence and nature, or is it more of a polytheistic view perspective? And I mean, like, there's so much. That's why, like, I stopped. I was like, let's not get into like some deeper theological context of this. Um, but yeah, stick to the church history fact. Like, we don't develop doctrine from this. It's more so it's affirming a doctrine. It's affirming that this is true, that Trinitarianism, for this case, is true, it is biblical, and it summarizes what the scripture is already telling us. For the second one, for the second part of it, it is how church history really shapes our interpretation. And I think this is important because I feel like, at least in the West, we look at scripture, we read something, and we're like, man, I got this crazy revelation. And nobody else, like mentally, you're like, nobody else has ever had this. Like, oh, this is like theologically groundbreaking, but the truth is you're not the first person to read Romans or Ephesians. Like you're truly not. I mean, the writers had they had their perspectives of putting on paper, and then the initial readers, the people it was written to, read it, and I mean, so on and so forth. There's probably like 2,000 years worth of people who have been reading through these scriptures before us, and I think that it's super important that we know these interpretations from our church fathers, before that and even after, because at times I think that the church fathers, not saying that they are fully getting it wrong, but I think that at times we read scripture in ways that it wasn't meant to be read. So church fathers have a tendency to read things very allegorically, and not everything is written to be allegory. So some things are supposed to be literal, some things are supposed to be metaphorical. I think in the modern age we kind of understand this a little bit more, but that's because of the passing of information. Um, Rather than they read it and then they had a teacher above them, and however the teacher taught, the interpretation was kind of how they would run with it. uh, we have full accessibility. Like you're probably watching this on a tablet, laptop, or a phone right now, and in the same quick and swiftness that you open this video, you can Google the the context and how you should interpret a certain book, and it'll come up with a ton of information on Google, on software, Bible software, everywhere. Like it really informs you on how you should look at Scripture, interact with Scripture. The third part of this church history kind of overview is the church exposes error. And we see this, our church history exposes error. And we see this from the very beginning, from the first century AD, even to like later on into modern days. You have things like Gnosticism, or you have, like we talked about earlier, like Arianism. Like these things were massive and exploding, and I think what I'm getting at is like there's nothing new under the sun. There's things that come and go, like Arianism, like Gnosticism. I know like mysticism is big right now. I know New Age is big, but we see this even in church history. And this is why I say it's important. We recognize patterns that are happening within the world, and how do we interact with this? Well, like I said, nothing new under the sun. Like God tells us that. Like there's a pattern that's happening. We have history that tells us how to deal with this, and maybe how not to deal with this. And we apply that in the proper sense of how we defend our faith or how we spread the gospel to people. And I think that especially like with the apologetic boom that we're getting within the Christian community, I think we should really look back. We should look back at church history. We should in a sense, rediscover the combatancy that the fathers were having, that the bishops were having, that evangelists were having in the past, because they still apply today. I mean, you look at like God Logic, his argument with the Islamic dilemma, right? That is actually that goes all the way. They found papers about this. It goes all the way back to, I believe, like the 7th century. Like this has been talked about for hundreds and like almost thousands of years at this point. Of there is dilemmas, there is debates that have been happening that just kind of like radically destroy points and point people back to Christ. And I think that that's the importance of this. Like I said before, we should study for at least these 4 or 5 things that I've already listed. Fifth thing, let me get to that. Church history teaches us what we should and shouldn't do. So even in that, I'll add on to this. Even in that, we should look at what hasn't worked just as much as we've seen what has worked. I think that it's hard. It's super hard because we hear a lot of things about Christianity on the internet that's like, well, Christians took part in like the Crusades, Christians took part in colonization, and so on and so forth, which is true. There are people who claimed to be Christians and took part in these things, but I don't think that they were acting Christ-like. And how do we navigate that? I think that we learn from situations like that. I think that we accept the history not maybe as right history, but as wrong, as those are men doing things that are going to be of the world. And we say, how do we correct? How do we kind of orient our church bodies to not be like that in the future? And how do we learn from the past? I think this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I mean, for the Catholics right now, they're kind of getting a lot of heat on them for opening up a prayer room for Muslims within the Vatican, and being hospitable in a way that I don't think they looked at least the history of this. When rooms have actually been opened up, um, Christian churches opening up rooms to Muslims to pray in, and it starts as that, but it kind of leads to something else. And we see this in the oldest mosque in Syria was actually a church. And how it became a mosque is this: when the area of Syria was taken by Islamic rule, they allowed the Christians to stay and worship within the church, but they opened it up for Muslims to also pray in a smaller area within the church, making it more of like a entirely like multi-religious building rather than just a Christian church that it was originally meant to be for. Um, but what this did was it kind of gave them a way in and to wiggle Christians out, because within some decades, I think it was, they actually um, they actually began to try to buy the Christians out of the building. And from what I've read, the Christians didn't really want to be bought out of the building, so they kind of, it seemed like they forced them to take land somewhere else so that they could tear down the church and build a mosque on that location. What I'm trying to get with this and saying is that I think that we need to look back at things like this specifically, um, and say, what is our history when we do something like open a prayer room within the church for another religion? What has happened historically within the church body when that has happened? Nothing really good has happened like that. When has it ever been good that we have allowed pagans to come in and worship in the temple? Nothing good. I mean, uh, nothing good has ever come out of that. Like, God has always like deemed that unrighteous. Um, I think with application of that, there are do's and don'ts that we can learn from church history. Um, Both, I think, in like traditional branches and within Protestant branches. I think that we can look back at history in all senses and say, yeah, that was wrong, or that was right. I think that we should practice that way. Um, and I think that the modernists need to really start looking at traditionalists in a more graceful way, in the same way that traditionalists need to look at modernists, and respect each other. Because I think that there is a equal balance that we could have of both, and that we can learn from both. Um, but yeah, that's all that I got for you guys today. If you guys like the video, go ahead and like and subscribe. Hopefully, we'll post another podcast here soon, that you guys can watch and comment and go crazy on. If you guys have any recommendations for our next podcast, or any videos or reactions that you guys want us to do, put them in the comments. We love you guys. We'll talk to you guys soon.